And we're starting off the list with the Space Shuttle Challenger. This image here is the last photo taken of the crew right before they took off. They never made it back home. The Challenger was a NASA shuttle and it had 7 crew members. Their mission was to release a communications satellite and study Halley's Comet. The shuttle took off on January 28, 1986, but just 73 seconds into their flight, the spacecraft disintegrated. The explosion was due to a problem with one of the rocket boosters. It was cold that day, and the rubber O-rings that helped seal the joints in the booster didn't work well because of the low temperature. This caused a leak of hot gas, which led to the explosion. Now, every astronaut knows the risks going into a flight. It's not a job you get into and expect to be 100% safe, but at the same time, it's tough looking at an image like this knowing that they were about to die. Number 9, the Andes flight disaster. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 took off on October 13th, 1972, carrying 5 crew members and 40 passengers, each members of the Old Christian Club rugby union team. This here is the last photo taken on the plane before it crashed in the Andes. Astonishingly though, 27 of the 45 passengers survived the initial crash. There are a series of photographs of these survivors posing next to the crashed plane. It's a tragic case as many people did die, but in a lot of these pictures, you see them smiling. They look just grateful to still be alive. But there's a darker side to this as well. Out of these 27 survivors, only 16 made it out alive, got back home, having been rescued 72 days later. And in order to survive, they had to make a pretty grisly decision. They resorted to the dead in order to survive. That certainly adds a dark layer to some of these images, but in the end, it is a miracle that 16 of these passengers survived the ordeal. This is one of a series of pictures snapped by 22-year-old Darsh Patel. He was hiking with friends through the Opshwa Preserve in New Jersey when he spotted this black bear and started snapping pictures. In the series of photos, you see this 300-pound black bear moving towards the camera. The friends started to back away, but it continued getting closer, so they decided to separate, running in different directions. When they regrouped later though, Patel wasn't there. 2 hours later, authorities discovered his lifeless body, having been mauled to death by the bear, which was lingering close by. The bear was shot by police, who discovered human remains inside of it. Being rushed at by a bear, one of my biggest fears. I can only imagine how terrifying the last moments of his life must have been here. Number 7, Christopher McCandless. This is the last photo taken of Christopher McCandless, a photo he took himself. On September 6th, 1992, the decomposing body of Christopher was found in a bus he'd been living in just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska. Journal entries by Christopher made it evident that he'd likely died about 19 days earlier. He'd decided to leave civilization behind and live off the grid. He spent 113 days living off the land, using the bus as his shelter. After this time, he decided to head back to civilization, but he was unable as the river he had crossed was much higher and swifter than it was when he initially ventured in. He returned back and posted an SOS note on the bus reading, "Attention, possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you. Chris McCandless." It was determined that he had died of starvation. Looking at this image, you can see how gaunt he looks. Apparently he was only 60-something pounds when he was actually discovered. Next up we have the Titanic. This is one of the last known photographs of the Titanic, taken while it was still afloat. Everyone knows the story here. This supposedly unsinkable ship totally sank. The Titanic disaster happened on April 15th, 1912. The Titanic was a big passenger ship known as unsinkable, but it hit an iceberg on its first voyage from England to America. The ship ship broke into two pieces and sank in the North Atlantic Ocean. Over 1,500 people died, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. The ship had safety measures like lifeboats, but there weren't enough for everyone on board. The crew didn't have proper training for emergencies, and communication was fairly limited. The iceberg was spotted too late, and the ship couldn't turn in time to avoid the collision. The cold water made survival hard for those who jumped into the ocean, leading to hypothermia and death within minutes. Number 5, we have George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. This is the last photograph snapped of these two mountain climbers right before they began their ascent of Mount Everest. They would never return. George Mallory and Sandy Irvine were British mountaineers who died during an expedition to Mount Everest in 1924. Mallory was an experienced climber, and he aimed to be the first person to reach Everest's summit. On June 8th, 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out from their high camp for the summit, but they never made it back. The exact circumstances of their deaths, it's still not 100% known to this day. Mallory's body was discovered in 1999, well preserved due to the cold climate, but Irvine's body and their camera, which could have contained evidence of a summit attempt, were not found. We still don't know if they reached the summit before they died or if they were descending when they met their ends. Next on the list is Joseph Avery. This photograph, taken in 1853, captures a man named Joseph Avery clutching onto a log for his dear life. Avery had been boating along the Niagara River with two other friends when the strong current caused them to lose control of their boat, crashing it into a rock. The two other passengers were carried off in the current, falling over the falls to their deaths. Avery managed to grab onto a log though, where he spent 18 whole hours. He must have started feeling completely hopeless until finally help did arrive. A rescue boat came to his aid, and he finally let out a sigh of relief. He could just let go of that goddamn log and would go on to live another day. Only he wouldn't, because the rescue boat capsized almost immediately, sending Avery over the falls where his two friends had perished just 18 hours before. I would have just been mad instead of scared at that point, I think. Like, real after 18 hours, what a cruel fate that would have been. I would just been, I should have just let go immediately. I spent a whole day here. Oh, anyway, I bet he let out some curse words on his way down. Oh man, sorry buddy. Number 3, the Dyatlov Pass incident. In 1959, a group of 10 students and alumni from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, began an expedition across the northern Urals in what was once then the Soviet Union. It was estimated that their trek would take about 16 days to complete, but the group would never return. A search party was dispatched days after the group had been expected to return home. The search and rescue teams did find the hikers, but not alive, and the cause of their deaths are still a mystery to this very day. First, their tents were discovered. They looked to have been torn open from the inside, and most of their gear remained, but the hikers themselves were nowhere to be seen. The following day, the bodies of the hikers were discovered. They had removed most of their clothing and seemed to have ventured out into the cold for some inexplicable reason. Hypothermia was of course the first suspected cause of death, but the students all had strange injuries that left the rescue team stumped. Bruises were present. One of them had thrown up blood. The last 4 bodies were discovered months later. They had built themselves a shelter, and they were fully clothed, but had suffered lethal wounds as well. They had broken bones and blunt force trauma to the head. Horrifyingly, 2 of them were missing their eyes. There are tons of theories about what happened here, ranging from a nuclear testing accident or secret government experiment to aliens somehow being involved, but yeah, we just don't know for sure. In at number 2 is the South Pole Expedition. Captain Robert Falcon Scott, great name, led a British expedition to the South Pole in 1911 to 1912. On January 17, 1912, after a long, grueling trek, Scott and his team finally reached the pole, only to discover that a Norwegian team, led by Roald Amundsen, had already arrived. This photograph shows them just after they made it to their destination. You can tell they're not only completely disheartened, but in noticeably bad shape. They're frostbitten, they look weak and just fed up. They began the long, torturous return journey across the frozen landscape. Facing severe weather, exhaustion, dwindling supplies, the team struggled to make progress and food shortages became very critical. Edgar Evans died on February 17, 1912, followed by Lawrence Oates, who ended his life by walking out of the tent into a blizzard. Scott and his remaining companions, Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, and Edgar Evans, pressed on, but their physical condition just continued to get worse. They were trapped in their tent for 9 days by a storm, unable to go anywhere, and they eventually died in the tent, just 11 miles from a supply depot. Scott's last diary entry was dated March 29th, 1912. Coming in at our number 1 spot, we have these portraits of some of the crew in John Franklin's polar expedition. These photographs were taken just 3 days before they set sail. John Franklin and his crew embarked on their expedition in 1845 to find the Northwest Passage, a sea route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic. The expedition included 2 ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. However, both ships became trapped in ice off the coast of King William Island in the Canadian Arctic. The harsh conditions took a toll on the crew. Franklin died in June 1847, probably from exposure and starvation. With their ships immobilized by ice, the crew attempted to survive on land, and over the next few years, many of the crew members succumbed to starvation, exposure, and diseases. In desperation, some had resorted to in an effort to find help, some crew members set out on foot, but none survived. In total, all 129 men on the expedition perished, and the ships themselves were abandoned in 1848, and the crew left behind written records of their struggles. The remains of the expedition's members were discovered by search parties, and investigations revealed these tragic circumstances of their deaths. So the first photo we're taking a look at is this one here. On February 3rd of 1959, musicians J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper, Ritchie Valens, and Buddy Holly tragically died in a plane crash near Clear Lake, Iowa, in what is famously known as the day the music died. This is the last photo taken of the 3 before boarding their final flight. The musicians had been traveling on a small Beechcraft Bonanza airplane chartered after their tour bus broke down. The plane, piloted by Roger Peterson, took off from the Mason City Municipal Airport en route to Hector Airport in Fargo, North Dakota. The weather conditions on the night of the crash were poor, with a combination of snow, sleet, and fog, and despite these conditions, the flight took off anyway, and the plane crashed only a few minutes after takeoff, around 1 a.m., into a cornfield near Clear Lake. There were no survivors. If you like videos just like this, creepy paranormal stuff, cryptid stuff, ghost stuff, we got it all, so hit that subscribe button and don't miss out. Next on the list is the 1943 glider crash. This is the last photograph taken of William D. Becker, the former mayor of St. Louis, along with several other prominent men in the community, right after boarding a brand new Waco CG-4 glider, manufactured by William B. Robertson, also pictured here. This was going to be the first public demonstration of the aircraft taking flight. Spectators watched from Lampert St. Louis Airport as the men boarded the glider, and what they didn't know was that they were witnessing the last moments of these men's lives. The glider was taxied by a plane to a runway for takeoff. They took flight, and once ready to allow the glider to glide, the towing cable was released. Almost immediately after the glider was released, though, something terrifying happened. Its right wing completely snapped off. Now, a wing snapping off of an aircraft spells disaster no matter what type of aircraft it is, but keep in mind these gliders were engineless, created specifically for the war efforts to be released like this and then glide down, usually into enemy lines. So now completely on its own and missing a wing, there was no way for it to make a safe landing. It just plummeted towards the earth, crashing into the ground. All 10 men aboard died on impact. Next up, we have the death of Robert Overacker. Robert Overacker was a daredevil from Camarillo, California. At 12:35 p.m. October 1st, he attempted to go over Niagara Falls on a jet ski with the intention of raising awareness about the homeless. And during his attempt, Overacker wore a life jacket and was carrying a flag promoting a charity for the homeless. homeless. He had also intended to deploy a parachute at the last moment to escape the fall, but the parachute didn't deploy and he plunged over the falls. This photo was taken just as he went over. He was only 39 years old. Number 7, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. On June 8th, 1924, British mountaineers George Mallory and Andrew Sandy Irvine went missing on Mount Everest during their attempt to reach the summit. Mallory and Irvine were part of the British 1924 Mount Everest expedition led by General Charles Bruce. The pair were last seen by their fellow climber Noel O'Dell at an elevation of around 28,000 feet on the northeast ridge of the mountain. The weather on Everest that day was unstable, very overcast with snow making for low visibility. After Mallory and Irvine failed to return to their camp, search parties were sent out, but no trace of them was found. Several expeditions in the following years attempted to locate Mallory and Irvine's remains and their camera, hoping to find clues about whether they reached the summit, but it wasn't until 1999 that Mallory's body was discovered on the north face of the mountain. The last photo snapped of them was taken by Noel O'Dell right before they began their ascent. Japan Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 747, crashed on August 12th of 1985, taking the lives of 520 of the 524 people on board. The crash was caused by severe structural failure, which led to a rapid decompression and loss of control. The last photo recovered from the crash site was taken by one of the passengers on the flight. In the photo, passengers can be seen wearing oxygen masks. The accident was caused by the rupture of the aircraft's rear pressure bulkhead, which separated the pressurized cabin from the unpressurized tail section. The bulkhead had been improperly repaired after a tail strike incident 7 years earlier. The failure of the rear pressure bulkhead led to a sudden and explosive decompression inside the cabin. Decompression caused damage to control cables and systems, making it almost impossible for the pilots to maintain control of the plane. The craft eventually entered a rapid descent and crashed into a mountain range. There were actually more than 4 passengers who survived the initial crash, but they died after several hours waiting to be rescued. Japan Airlines Flight 123 crash is one of the deadliest single aircraft accidents in aviation history. Number 5, Snake Man. This is the last photo taken of Ali Khan Samsudin. He was known as the Snake King after he spent 12 hours a day for 40 days living with 400 cobras in a small room. He also stayed in a small glass enclosure with 6,000 scorpions for 21 days, earning him the title Scorpion King. His 2006 performance in Kuala Lumpur would sadly be his last, though. During his show, he was bitten by a king cobra, one of the deadliest snakes in the world, with venom powerful enough to take down a full-sized elephant in a matter of hours. Samsudin had been bitten before. He'd even suffered a couple cobra bites before and made it out alive, but this time he didn't recover. His condition just got worse and worse, and the Snake King died in the hospital 3 days later. Next, we have the last photo of Mayinga Naseka. Mayinga Naseka was a nurse in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, during the 1976 Ebola outbreak. She contracted the Ebola virus while treating patients at Mambalad Hospital in Kinshasa. She caught the virus while treating a nun who had been flown in from Yambuku Mission Hospital, where the initial outbreak began. Naseka's case became widely known as she was one of the earliest identified healthcare workers to be infected during the outbreak. And in this photo, you see her standing with another nurse tending to a patient. She died just a few days after this picture was taken. The nurses weren't given the proper protective equipment, and there hadn't been any proper precautions taken to prevent contact with the nun's blood or fluids, because at the time, it wasn't known just how deadly the virus really was. Next up, we have the 1961 US figure skating team. This is the last photo of the US figure skating team, which was taken at the airport shortly before they boarded Sabena Flight 548. In the photo, team members appeared in high spirits, smiling, posing for the camera. Little did they know that this would be the last moment captured before the tragic event that claimed their lives. On February 15th of 1961, Sabena Flight 548 a Boeing 707 aircraft crashed while attempting to land at Brussels Airport in Belgium. The plane was carrying the entire team along with coaches, officials, and other passengers. The crash resulted in the tragic loss of 72 people on board. The cause of the crash never been 100% determined, but the most likely cause was a failure in the plane's flap system combined with poor weather conditions. The pilot struggled to maintain control during the landing attempt, leading to the deadly accident. Alright, next up we have the last photo of Christopher McCandless. On September 6th, 1992, the decomposing body of Christopher McCandless was found in a bus he had been living in just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska. McCandless had embarked on a journey to leave civilization behind and live off the grid. He spent 113 days living off the land, using the bus as his shelter. His journal entries were discovered, and it was likely he died about 19 days before his body was discovered. After living in the bus for over 3 months, McCandless finally decided he was going to try and make his way back to civilization. But this was unfortunately not going to be as easy as he thought. The river he had crossed to reach the bus was now much higher and swifter than it was when he first ventured in. He decided to turn back, left an SOS note on the bus reading, "Attention possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I'm injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I'm all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I'm collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless." McCandless succumbed to starvation while waiting for help that never arrived. When his body was discovered, he appeared extremely gaunt, reportedly weighing only around 60 pounds at the time of his death. And finally, we have Princess Diana. This photo was taken by paparazzi in August of 1997 in Paris. Pictured here is Princess Diana, Dottie Fade, her driver Henry Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, right before a fatal car accident. Rees-Jones was the only survivor. Princess Diana and Dottie Fade were in a romantic relationship. They had been vacationing together in the French Riviera when they were pursued by paparazzi. As they left the Ritz Hotel in Paris, their car was chased by paparazzi photographers on motorcycles trying to capture images of the couple. In the Pont d'Alma tunnel, the car lost control and slammed into a concrete pillar. The impact of the crash was severe, leading to the deaths of Princess Diana and the other two in the car. Of course, the bodyguard did survive though. The aggressive pursuit by the paparazzi was widely criticized. Some people blamed them for indirectly causing the accident due to their relentless chase, something that I definitely agree with. I hate paparazzi. Like, just come on, get a real job, honestly.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Queen's last photos. Look, these last photos of the Queen are not dark at all. Yes, I know the title of this video says dark, but I can't do it. I can't say that it is. The Queen literally looks so sweet in this photo, and there's nothing but light surrounding her. She reminds me so much of my granny. I hope they're having tea together in heaven. The Queen almost looks like an angel already here in these photos. In almost every one of these last shots shared, the Queen is smiling so big, as if she's just happy and not suffering or anything. Of course, the public doesn't know the details of her final days and what she might have gone through, but these photos would suggest that she was content in her favorite place, Balmoral, and just living up her final days on the planet. You could spin it and say that anyone's final days are dark, but nah, these are just bright and beautiful, and I refuse to associate them with the characterization of dark. In our number 9 spot, we have Princess Diana's last shots. Here we have a bunch of shots of Princess Diana in her final hours, getting into her car with her bodyguard and the man that she was seeing, Dodi Fayed. She was in Paris at the time when her car crashed, killing all of the passengers in the car. There is one final shot of Princess Diana with Dodi in an elevator, and Diana is looking directly at the elevator camera and smiling. The shot is quite eerie as you look at her beautiful smile and spirit having fun until the end. What makes them even more eerie is if there's a slight part of you that buys into the theory that the crash was an insider job. That always makes me so uncomfortable to think about, and it quite possibly makes looking at these images more chilling. In our number 8 spot, we have the Queen and Prince Philip. This is one of the last photos taken of Prince Philip at age 99 with Queen Elizabeth II. It's actually so sweet and sad at the same time as they look at a homemade wedding anniversary card from their grandchildren. The picture was taken to mark their 73rd wedding anniversary right before the prince passed away. Did y'all know that Prince Philip was already a prince of Greece before he was married to Queen Elizabeth II and became Prince Consort and Duke of Edinburgh? Because I didn't. But honestly, I should have guessed. I feel like the royal family previously used to keep the bloodlines quite close and within the realm of the blue bloods, you know? Ever heard of the blue bloods theory, anyone? People believe that you're either programmed in your blood to be wealthy or poor. It's a really interesting thought and rabbit hole to go down, that's for sure. In our number 7 spot, we have the Queen and her grandson. One of the last photos of Queen Elizabeth II with Prince Louis, her grandson, is such a treat to look at. This photo was taken at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in June 2022, and honestly, earlier that day you do see the Queen looking possibly a little distressed. She's frowning a lot and truly just looking a little uncomfortable, but in this moment captured of the Queen and Prince Louis, she literally looks particularly blissful. Prince Louis is holding his ears in the most comical way, appearing a little distressed from the noise, I'm sure, of, you know, thousands of Brits below him that had come to honor the Queen in her celebrations. We have seen some other smaller royals do something similar when on the balcony in the past, but no one can deny that Prince Louis certainly is full of life and personality, and so it's really just a funny shot to see. Albeit sad though that perhaps the prince's last photo wasn't a smiling one, but I bet his adult self will appreciate the lightness of it. In our number 6 spot, we have the Jubilee family photo. The last photo of the family together on the balcony without Harry and Meghan was during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration on the final day of June the 5th, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II can be seen with now King Charles III, now Queen Consort Camilla, Prince William, Duchess Kate, and their 3 kids, Prince Louis, Prince George, and Princess Charlotte. The royal family looks very happy to be celebrating the Queen's long reign. The Queen herself looks amazing in her vibrant green suit. However, in video footage from the time the family was on the balcony, the Queen does seemingly have moments of looking a little sad, and gosh, I wonder what's going through her mind. It's also really sad that this celebratory day is one of their last big celebrations and moments photographed together. In our number 5 spot, we have Prince Harry at the Queen's funeral. These are a few of the last photos taken of Prince Harry at the Queen's funeral. Of course, these photos are terribly sad to see and dark, as he is not only attending the Queen's funeral, but his grandmother's funeral. In some of the photos you see the prince crying and hiding his face, and then you also see him walking during the service holding his wife Meghan Markle's hand. The prince stepped down from the royal family and gave up his name, and so during the funeral we saw him be quite separated from his royal family. It was rumored that the prince and Meghan were snubbed for the funeral procession as they were seated in the second row behind the royal family, but whether that is protocol or snubbery, that has not been confirmed. Assuming it was protocol, that must have been so hard on him to not be able to fully be present with his family during this time, but hopefully he was included in ways we did not see. After Meghan Markle's expose with Oprah and the interviews that Harry has also done commenting on his family, I'm not so sure of that, but hopefully the death of the Queen will bring the family closer together again. In our number 4 spot, we have Prince William and Prince Harry together. One of the few photos captured at the funeral for Queen Elizabeth II is of Prince William and Prince Harry together, and these photos have had the world going crazy as to whether they are friendly or not. Some say that the two princes are not on good terms, while others say that they have made amends due to the passing of the Queen. What we are certain of is that they didn't seem to converse much during the service, and they definitely felt a tad frosty to each other. Although it was obviously a sad day, and perhaps the coldness of the photos really had more to do with their sadness for their grandmother and them both retreating within themselves mentally, as people often do at funerals, rather than them just being in a massive fight that has forever split them apart. The brothers were seemingly so close growing up, and so I think I speak for everyone when I say that I hope whatever is going on with them gets mended, because life is too short. In our number 3 spot, we have Peter Phillips. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Who? Peter Phillips is not a part of the immediate royal family, but he is the son of Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, and so he is another one of her grandsons. And well, a rather dark photo was captured of him at the Queen's funeral that I just have to share with you all. He was caught possibly exposing his own thoughts in a photo from September 19th, the Queen's funeral, as he's walking behind Prince Harry and, yes, Meghan Markle. In the photo, he is glaring at Meghan Markle. Was he captured in a moment of internal judgment? Whatever is going on, it is clear that he feels some kind of negative feelings toward Meghan, and I mean, most of the royal family seemingly does, as Meghan has been exposing the behind the scenes goings on within the royal family. They have always been quite private, and the world saw them as a mystery, besides, well, some of the scandals that have happened over the years, but for the most part, they have remained quite private, so perhaps Peter feels uncomfortable with Meghan around, but in any case, this was a dark moment captured from that day. In our number 2 spot, we have Queen Elizabeth II waving to her father. Okay, I went back in the archives for this one. This photo honestly is super sad to see and quite dark, so I needed to add it to the list. In 1952, the Queen left for a trip to Kenya, and it was on this trip that she became Queen and learned of the death of her father, King George VI. In this photo we see right here, the Queen is looking at her father and waving to him for the last time. Whoa. Can you imagine if the last moment you had with your father was caught on camera? I'm sure this has been the case for a lot of people, but man, would that crumble me inside if that were to happen. It would be so sad, but also a gift as well. And when you think about it, the Queen looks quite happy in this photo, and so it's kinda a nice thought to think that perhaps one of the last moments that the King had with his daughter, she was smiling. Dark, but beautiful at the same time. Finally, in our number 1 spot, we have Prince Andrew at the funeral. Arguably one of the darkest last photos of one of the darkest royal family members, Prince Andrew is seen walking with his siblings and the new king from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey. He looks as one would expect one to look when their parent passes away, but it's hard to not look at him and see an aura of possibly someone who was involved with the horrendous crimes that were led by Jeffrey Epstein. After the public found out about Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey and a lot of the suspicious activity that didn't get cleared up after Prince Andrew did an interview on the accusations, the prince resigned from his public roles, and the Queen herself removed his honorary military affiliations and royal charitable patronages in January 2022. Prince Andrew lobbied very hard to stop Charles from becoming king. Apparently Prince Andrew doesn't get on with King Charles III very well, so that's very interesting. Anyways, it's hard not to see a picture of him and immediately think dark.
Starting off this countdown, we have the helicopter crash. In 2019, 32-year-old Benno Anthony Penna and his wife, Megan Michelle Hawk Penna, went out for a helicopter ride in Utah. Their plan was to fly to South Valley Region Airport in West Jordan. Their ETA was 2 p.m. When the pair failed to arrive, helicopters were sent out looking for them. Shortly before 6:30 p.m. that day, their helicopter was found. Sadly, they had crashed. This photo was posted just a few minutes before the deadly crash. Look how happy the pair look. Little did they know what was soon to happen. Now, authorities don't know for sure what happened, but it was reported that there was some heavy weather in the area that day. So maybe that's what played a role in the crash. It's a very tragic story. In our 9th spot, we have the drowning. On November 11th, 2017, fans of the Filipino TV star and dancer Franco Hernandez were heartbroken when they heard the news of his passing. On that day, he was out with his girlfriend and some friends on a small boat. This photo was taken that day just before a wave hit their boat, knocking everyone overboard into the water. Sadly, Franco drowned. The people operating the boat did manage to pull him and his girlfriend back onto the boat, but by that time he was already unconscious. He was immediately brought to a clinic but was declared dead on arrival. This is so sad because everyone was out enjoying their day, having fun. Little did they know what was going to happen. Moving on to number 8, we have the day the music died. February 3rd, 1959 is also referred to as the day the music died, because on that day, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson died in a plane crash. The three had been on tour together. That day, they boarded the plane and were headed out to the next stop on their tour, but the three men and their pilot never made it. Now the thing is, the trio had been taking a tour bus for the first half of the tour, but they said it was unreliable and freezing cold, so being fed up, they decided to take a charter plane. Had they continued on with the tour bus, they would have made it there alive. This photo was taken of the three artists right before they hopped on the plane. It's the last photo of them. Apparently, the pilot was unaware of a weather advisory that had been issued before takeoff. A short while after liftoff, the plane ran into troubles and crashed. Apparently, the scene of the crash was very gruesome. The three artists had been thrown from the plane in the crash. The pilot was trapped inside of the cockpit. Coming in at number 7, we have the cliff jumping. Several years ago, Naval Air crewman Shannon Nunez decided to take a celebratory jump at a popular cliff jumping spot in Hawaii. She was celebrating her recent qualifications as a Naval Air crewman. Jumping off this cliff was quite common in the area, but it's also very dangerous. The cliff is roughly 80 feet high. She took this photo before her jump. Little did she know what was going to happen. When she jumped, she ended up landing sideways. She then started to panic and drowned. Her two friends that were with her tried to save her, but it was far too late. She was so excited for this jump. She was so proud of herself and her accomplishments. It's just sad that it had to end this way for her. Coming in at number 6, we have the falling rock. This photo features a group of individuals who went out hiking. Little did they know what was going to happen a few moments later. Literally minutes after this photo was taken, a rock above fell and hit the man on the far right in the red shirt. It crushed him completely. He was dead upon impact. All his friends witnessed this happen to him, and that must have been traumatizing. Like, it was such a freak accident. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Burning Man Festival. The Burning Man Arts and Music Festival is an annual festival that takes place in the Black Rock Desert of Nevada. Tens of thousands of people gather from all over the world for it. Its main attraction is this big effigy that is then lit on fire. Well, during the festival in 2017, a man named Aaron Joel Mitchell ran right into the burning structure. He was burnt alive. To this day, his family does not know why he did this. He was not depressed, nor was he having thoughts of taking his own life. On top of that, a toxicology report showed that he did not have any alcohol or drugs in his system. But Aaron decided to dodge security and then run straight into the flames. Firefighters tried to stop him, but they were unsuccessful. When they did retrieve his body, it was far too late. This is the last photo ever taken of him. It's the moment he took his own life by running straight into the flames. In our 4th spot today, we have the birthday murder. On December 17th, 2017, 21-year-old Ismael Gutierrez and his friends went out for dinner to celebrate his 21st birthday. This photo was taken at his birthday celebration. Gutierrez is the young man holding the bottle. Later that night at around 3 AM, he had been shot along with a random female. The group had been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Gutierrez and the woman were both taken to the hospital, but sadly he did not make it. And the fact that this happened on his birthday when he just wanted to have a good time makes it 10 times sadder. In our 3rd spot, we have the cabin fire. A couple of years ago, Bethany and her friends decided to go to a cottage. They spent the day out on the lake and then had a nice barbecue dinner. This photo was taken of Bethany out enjoying her time at the cabin. Sadly, 6 hours after this photo was taken, Bethany lost her life. An ember from the grill sparked a fire on the cabin deck. Soon, the whole cabin went up in flames. All the friends were able to escape except for Bethany and a dog. This is why you hug your friends and family extra tight. It's sad, but you never know when their last day will be. In our 2nd spot, we have Cameron Boyce. On July 6, 2019, Disney fans were shocked when they heard that the talented child actor Cameron Boyce had passed away in his sleep. He was taken from us way too soon. He was only 20 when he passed, and he had a bright future ahead of him. Now, Cameron passed away in his sleep due to a seizure which was brought on from an ongoing medical condition for which he was being treated for. Still, no one saw this coming. This photo was one of the last photos ever taken of Cameron. A beautiful photo of a beautiful soul. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the armed robbery. On September 21st, 2009, Angela Escobar and Alex Santiago were sleeping peacefully when an armed robber entered their home and shot them both dead. The robber proceeded to grab some personal belongings before fleeing the scene of the crime. This is the last photo of Angelina. What a beautiful and innocent soul, taken far too soon. Eventually though, the killer was caught. His name is Christopher Doering. He was caught after taking a phone call in jail. On the recorded call, he admitted to shooting both Angelina and Alex, and then said, and I quote, "I have no sympathy at all, I can do that again. That don't bother me." That just makes me sick to my stomach. Rest in peace, Angelina and Alex. Starting off this countdown, we have the wedding. This story broke my heart. So this is a photo taken of Heather Mosher on her wedding day. She was battling a very deadly case of breast cancer. Sadly, she passed away 18 hours after getting married. So on December 23rd, 2016, Heather was diagnosed with breast cancer. That night, her partner David proposed to her. He said he wouldn't let her go through this alone. 5 days later, they learned her diagnosis was a triple negative. In September of 2017, the cancer had spread, so the two quickly made wedding arrangements. On December 22nd of 2017, the two were married, and just look at how happy Heather is. Again, 18 hours later, she lost her battle with cancer. Moving on at number 9, we have the Falls. Just recently, a man named Roy George was out at Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. He was there with a friend. He was at the top of the cliff posing for photos when he accidentally slipped and fell over the cliff and into the falls. This was the last photo taken of him, moments before he fell. Apparently, he was taking photos in the spot known as the Danger Zone. He got too close to the edge and fell. Tourists heard his friend's screams and rushed to the scene, but by the time park officials got there, Roy was long gone. In our 8th spot, we have the brain aneurysm. This photo was taken on a woman's wedding. It shows all her friends heading to the venue. This is the last photo taken of the man on the left, the bride's best friend. Sometime during their wedding reception, the man had gotten into an Uber and gone home. He didn't say to anyone that he was feeling off or anything, but he suffered from a brain aneurysm, and a couple hours later he was declared brain dead. The poor bride, on one of her happiest days, lost her best friend. She found out after the reception was over. She said that she spent her honeymoon mourning over his death. Like, that is so scary and tragic. In our 6th spot, we have the Rhode Island Station nightclub fire. On the evening of February 20th, 2003, a fire broke out at a nightclub. More than 100 people were engulfed in the flames, including one of the guitarists playing that night. 230 people were injured. This photo was taken before the fire broke out. The fire was caused by one of the pyrotechnics, and you can see it in the background of this photo, along with some of the people that passed away that night. Now, this fire spread very fast. Within seconds, the room was filled with smoke and people were panicking, trying to get out. However, this resulted in a human pileup at the exit, and that's why so many people lost their lives that night. Such a tragic accident. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the fatal photo. On July 2nd, 2013, combat photographer Hilda Clayton died while taking photos during a National Army fire training exercise. Unfortunately, a mortar tube accidentally exploded, killing Hilda and 4 National Army soldiers. Hilda managed to capture the blast that killed her. This photo hits deep. No one knew what was gonna happen. She literally captured the thing that killed her and the soldiers. It's so scary. Moving on to number 4, we have the last dive. This mother shared the last photo that she took of her son on Reddit. He was swimming in their pool when she captured this photo of him. 5 minutes after that photo was taken, he died due to shallow water blackout. Now, I think this topic needs to be talked about more because I'm a strong swimmer and I've never heard of this until now. Basically, shallow water blackout causes you to faint underwater. It can happen if you hyperventilate before diving or swimming, or if you hold your breath for too long underwater. And it can happen to anyone, even advanced swimmers. Sadly, it happened to this poor kid. Moving on at number 3, we have the dangerous selfie. Too many people in this series have lost their lives by trying to take selfies, including this next man. So back in 2016, a businessman named Jia Lijun went to a wildlife park alone, and he was super excited to be there. But while taking photos with a walrus, it ended up grabbing him and dragging him into the water. As a result, he drowned. So apparently, moments before this happened, Jia sent a bunch of selfies that he took with the walrus to his friends. Then, out of nowhere, while he had his back to the animal, it grabbed him and playfully dragged him into the water. So it wasn't like the walrus meant to kill him. A zookeeper rushed in to save Jia, but was sadly also grabbed and dragged underwater. They both died. In our 2nd spot, we have SeaWorld. So the first time I heard about this case was through the Netflix documentary called Blackfish. Seriously, a super good documentary I highly recommend, but also pretty scarring. So on February 24th, 2010, an orca named Tilikum, Tilly for short, grabbed its SeaWorld trainer, Dawn Brandshow, by her ponytail and dragged her into the pool. She tried to escape his grip, but when she did, Tilly slammed into her and then grabbed her and shook her violently underwater by her arm. When medics did get to her, part of her arm was already off and in Tilly's mouth. She sadly passed away. Now, before this happened, Dawn had a full show with Tilly. After the show, she fed him and poured some water on his face. She then sat close to him, talking to him and stroking him. They called this relationship session. Family videotaping managed to get Dawn's last few moments on film. And in our number one spot, we have the volcano eruption. On December 9th, 2019, Stephanie Browitt and her sister Crystal and her dad Paul were on White Island when the volcano erupted. This photo was taken 6 minutes before the eruption. The three of them were on a tour, and it wasn't until they arrived on the island that they found out that the volcano alert level was at 2, which is the highest level it could be before an eruption. But they were on tour with their sea crews, so it wasn't like they could have just left the island. Well, as they were walking back to the boat, they saw ash coming out of the volcano. That's when their guide told them to run. Unfortunately, Crystal and Paul and 21 others died as a result of the eruption. Stephanie survived, but about 70% of her body were covered with third-degree burns. She also lost parts of her fingers. Starting off this countdown, we have the Deadly Falls. It's thought that 20 to 30 people die every year by going over Niagara Falls. Between 1850 to 2011, 5,000 bodies were found at the bottom of the falls. That's horrifying. Sadly, 20-year-old Ayana Tokumasu is one of the fall's victims. In 2011, Ayana was visiting the falls with her friends. At first, it's thought that she climbed over the railing and threw herself into the water, but surveillance footage revealed otherwise. The footage revealed that she was balancing on the safety railing to look at the falls, while her friends were taking photos of her. As she was climbing back over the railing, she lost her balance and slipped in. The last photo of her was taken right before she fell in, and it was taken by accident by another couple visiting the falls that day. The couple was having their photo taken, and in the background you can see Ayanu standing over the railing looking at the falls. It's so tragic. Too many people have died trying to take the perfect picture. Coming in at number 9, we have the final goodbye. This is the last photo of a 21-year-old college student named Luke. It was taken by his family members as he headed off to college. Just look at the photo. It's as if he was saying, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll be back to visit." Like trying to reassure his family that he's gonna be okay on his own. Sadly, while driving to college, he got in a car accident. The other driver had been drinking while driving. The car accident took his life. Now this breaks my heart. They probably were already so nervous to send their kid away to college. They said their goodbyes, not knowing it would be their last. Coming in at number 8, we have Connor Cummings. Connor Cummings was a 20-year-old college student and photographer that died doing what he loved. In 2016, Connor and his friend Dimitri climbed up on top of the Four Seasons Hotel to take some photos. This was the last photo taken of Connor by Dimitri. It was taken before he fell 52 stories to his death. On that day, Connor climbed up on the hotel's catwalk to take more photos, but as he was backing up, he slipped and fell. Just another young person that was taken from this world too soon. Moving on to number 7, we have Hank Carr. On May 19th, 1998, Hank Carr was arrested after fatally shooting his girlfriend's son. After he shot him, he took his body to the police and said it was an accident, and that the boy was dragging the gun when it went off. He also lied and said that he was Joseph Bennett, the biological father of the child. Anyway, Hank ended up running from the police station while being chased by police officers. Finally, he was caught and arrested. This photo was taken when he was captured by the police, and it's the last photo taken of him and the 2 detectives in the photo. Just minutes later, Hank used a hidden key to escape his handcuffs. He then killed the 2 other detectives seen in the photo, the one on the left and the one on the far right. He then led police on a huge chase before taking his own life. In our 6th spot, we have the glider plane crash. On August 1st in 1943 in St. Louis, people from all over gathered to see the test flight for a glider plane. Sadly, the test flight didn't go as planned. After takeoff, the plane lost one of its wings. Apparently, a bolt wasn't fastened tight enough and the whole wing came off. The plane then fell 2,000 feet down into a field. All 10 passengers inside passed away. The plane was filled with some notable people, such as Mayor William Becker, the founder of Lambert Airport and the head of the company that built the plane, and St. Louis County Chief Executive. This was the last photo taken of the men. It was taken just minutes before takeoff. What's very creepy is that people who witnessed this accident said the glider went down with a huge thump. There was no explosion or fire, just a very loud thump. That sound has haunted many for years. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the drop-off. This photo was posted to Reddit by the user Tonight As You Sleep. This is the last photo she took of her husband. As he walked into the airport, she took out her phone to take this photo. 2 days later, he was found dead in his hotel room. This is so tragic and sad. Apparently, he passed away from peritonsillar abscess. Basically, it's a bacterial infection from untreated strep throat or tonsillitis. He kept saying he would tough it out and that he was fine, although his wife told him he needed to see a doctor. Eventually, the infection spread to his blood and took his life. In our 4th spot, we have the fatal trip. Tara and Pippa Darlington had worked hard to save up enough money to go on a trip of a lifetime together. They saved their money up and planned for this trip for months. They were accompanied on this trip by their friend Josh Stump. This photo was taken of the two sisters while on their 3-month trip around Morocco. They had an amazing time. However, on September 17, 2012, while on their journey back home to the UK for their mom's birthday, they got in a terrible car accident. Both the sisters were killed. Their friend Joshua managed to survive, but was seriously injured and was in a coma. I tried to find out more of what happened to Josh, like if he woke up from his coma, but I couldn't find anything on it. I just find it so sad that this mother lost both her daughters. Now, apparently the place where the car accident occurred was the same road where there have been 25 other deaths 2 weeks prior. Yeah, 25 deaths in 2 weeks on this road. Something's not right there. That road is not safe. Coming in at number 3, we have George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. George Mallory is known as one of the first people to climb Mount Everest. Sadly, he is also one of the mountain's first victims. So in 1924, George, along with his friend and fellow climber Andrew, or Sandy Irvine, began their ascent of Everest. But to this day, no one knows if they were ever able to make it to the top, or what happened along the way. But they did not return home. This was the last photo taken of the two together. Over the years, several expeditions have been conducted in order to find the two missing climbers. 75 years later, George Mallory's body was found. It appeared as if he had fallen to his death. He was found with a bad rope injury around his waist, which made it seem like Irvine was attached to him and they fell together. But to this day, Irvine's body has never been found. On top of that, George had a bad wound on his forehead. It's thought that when he fell, he died from an ice axe getting plunged into his head. Now, like I said before, it's unsure if the pair successfully made it to the top, but it's thought that they may have. This is because George was climbing with a picture of his wife in his wallet. He said he would leave it at the top of Everest. When he was found, the picture was not on him, meaning maybe they did make it to the top and he put it up there as promised. Also, George was found with his snow goggles in his pocket. Maybe this is because they were making their way back down as the sun was going down, so he took off his goggles so he could see better. But sadly, I don't think we'll ever know what truly happened to the pair. Starting off this countdown, we have the Challenger. On January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart during the flight. It happened only 73 seconds into the flight. This resulted in the death of all 7 crew members. This photo was taken moments before the crew boarded the space shuttle. Like, look how proud and happy they all look. Little did they know that that would be their last final moments. which is extremely depressing. The crew consisted of 5 NASA astronauts and 2 payload specialists. Basically what happened was at 11:39 a.m. the shuttle started to break down over the Atlantic Ocean. It started because of a failure of the O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. From there, the right solid rocket booster failed during takeoff. Then the force of the takeoff basically caused the rocket to break apart. Now it's thought that some crew survived the initial breakup, but the impact to the ocean surface would have killed them. Coming in at number 8, we have the Uruguayan Flight 571. On October 13th, 1972, a rugby team along with some family and friends were flying to Chile for a team match when their plane crashed. This photo was taken before this crash. Some of the people in the photo didn't survive. Those that did suffered to survive 72 days in the Andes mountain. What's even worse, in order to survive they had to eat their dead friends and family members. I can't imagine going through that. Like, what a terrible, terrible incident. In our 6th spot, we have the avalanche. This photo is of a man who is out touring and skiing near a ski resort named Flüsserberg in Switzerland. About an hour later, he died in an avalanche. His wife, who took the photo, managed to survive. According to a post, the man was experienced in hiking mountains. He had previously climbed Mont Blanc. This day, he didn't bring his safety equipment with him because he thought it was only going to be a small hike. And he had hiked that route before. Sadly, this was his last time. They found him 3 hours later after the incident. His wife managed to escape, but the last thing she heard her husband say was, "Get away from me, save yourself," which is so heartbreaking. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Joseph Avery. In 1853, Joseph Avery went rafting on the Niagara River with his 2 friends. However, during the trip, the boat flipped. The current had been stronger than they anticipated. His 2 friends drowned, but Avery was a strong swimmer and managed to get a hold of a log that was wedged between 2 rocks. Avery was stuck there holding onto that log for 18 hours. It's because initially no one could hear his screams for help. When people did see him there, it took a while before a rescue went underway. This photo was taken by a bystander. You can see Avery holding onto the log for his life. Unfortunately, it was for nothing. When he got on the rescue boat, it capsized and Avery was swept over the falls. Like, imagine that, surviving for 18 hours, holding on for your dear life, and then when you finally think you're safe, you aren't. So sad. Moving on, number 4, we have Maksud Khan. Maksud Khan was a 20-year-old man that had a fascination with tigers. It all started back in the summer of 2014 during his first trip to the zoo. From there, he became fascinated with tigers and would often talk about them. From there, he would secretly visit the zoo to see the tigers. Sadly, this would lead to his death. In September of 2014, Khan visited the zoo again. This time, he wanted to get up close and personal with the tigers, so he crossed 3 safety barriers to get in. This was the last photo ever taken of him, before the tiger mauled him to death. It was taken by a stunned onlooker who saw the tiger paw at him before dragging his body around and then eating him. Coming in at number 3, we have Moira Smith. Officer Moira Smith is another individual on this list that died a hero. Moira was a police officer on scene during the 9/11 attacks. On this day, without hesitation, she went into the World Trade Center's South Tower and helped to evacuate people. This was the last photo taken of her. It's her alongside one of the victims that she had rescued. 10 minutes later, Moira re-entered the building to help more people escape. Unfortunately, the building collapsed on her. She was one of the 72 other law enforcement individuals who died on this day. May they all rest in peace. Starting off this countdown, we have the bride-to-be. This photo was taken in June of 2014. It features bride-to-be Colette Moreno and her best friend Ashley M. Theobald. They both were on their way to Colette's bachelorette party. You can tell by this selfie just how excited the two are. But sadly, minutes later, the two got into a car crash. Ashley survived, but Colette didn't. So apparently what happened was the two were driving behind a big truck. The truck's fumes were really bad and was affecting Colette's asthma. As a result, she started having a bad coughing fit. So Ashley decided to try to pass the truck and get in front of it. So she pulled into the other lane and sped up to pass it. But seconds later, a car emerged up a slight hill and the two crashed head-on. After the incident, Colette passed away from injuries from the crash. Ashley was horrified. She said that when the crash happened, she looked over to her friend and she looked completely fine. But clearly, that wasn't the case. It just scares me how quick your whole life can change. Like 1 second Colette's excited for her bachelorette party, and the next second she's being rushed to the hospital. Moving on to number 9, we have the Selfie Olympics. A few years ago, the hashtag Selfie Olympics was trending. Basically, it pushed people to take elaborate selfies. It led to a lot of people climbing up their doors. In fact, one guy got a blanket and pillow and laid down pretending to be asleep on top of his door. But then we have Oscar Reyes. Sadly, his attempt at the Selfie Olympics took his life. On January 2nd, 2015, Oscar dressed up in a SpongeBob costume and then climbed up on a door in his mother's bathroom. He then took a photo there and uploaded it to Facebook, and it got 200 likes. But later on, when he climbed the door again to take more photos, he slipped and fell and hit his head on the toilet. He passed away soon after from loss of blood. It's so sad how people are literally losing their lives trying to gain attention on social media. I just wish that wasn't the case for Oscar. In our 8th spot, we have the Lost Hiker. This image was posted on Reddit by the user Cheetos Stained Heart. This was the last photo ever taken of her brother-in-law. A couple years back, he had gone camping and hiking, but never returned home. He was missing for a month until someone found his body on the side of the cliff. Beside him was his cell phone and backpack. On the phone was this photo. His death is ruled an accident, and it said that he fell off the cliff while on his adventure. It's just scary to think about how this guy was just relaxing, enjoying the view, and then minutes later he's plummeting to his death. In our 7th spot, we have the lightning strike. This photo features two brothers, Michael on the right and Sean McQuilkin on the left. The photo was taken just before lightning struck Sean. So the two were in Sequoia National Park, and the photo was just supposed to be a goofy photo. Your hair typically stands up when lightning is about to strike. Little did they know that the lightning was actually going to strike them. Now, this photo was then used as a PSA to warn parents about the dangers of lightning. Now, Sean didn't actually pass away from the lightning strike. In fact, he was knocked unconscious and suffered terrible 3rd-degree burns. Later, he took his own life. Still, this is one of the last photos ever taken of him. Coming in at number 4, we have Robert Overcracker. Robert Overcracker was known as a daredevil. He graduated from a California stunt school and then went on to do some daring tricks. One stunt he planned for 7 years. Little did he know that that would be the last stunt he ever performed. On October 1st, 1995, he got on a jet ski in Niagara Falls. His plan was to go over the falls on the jet ski, but then make it down safely with his parachute. However, while doing so, his parachute failed to open. This photo was taken of him just as his jet ski went off the falls. That was the last photo ever taken of him. It was taken seconds before he was torn apart by the unforgiving falls. In our 2nd spot, we have the train selfie. Sadly, this is another case of people that risk their life for a selfie. In October of 2011, 3 girls, Savannah Webster, her older sister Kelsey, and her friend Essa Ricker were standing by some trains taking selfies. The last photo ever taken of them was this one right here. It was uploaded to Facebook with the caption, "Standing right by a train, ahaha, this is awesome." But as they posted this, another train came hurling towards them from the opposite direction. You can see the oncoming train's headlights in the top right of the photo. Before they knew it, the train hit all 3 of them and took their lives. John Anderson, the conductor of the train that hit the girls, said, and I quote, "They were in their own little world." He had blasted the train horn to get the girls' attention, but there was no response from any of them. They honestly didn't hear it coming. He continued on saying, "We watched in horror as we got closer. We saw them for about 12 seconds until they disappeared from our sight, and the train continued moving forward. They tried to stop the train in time, but sadly it was too late." And in our number 1 spot, we have the last free dive. Nicholas Mavoli was known as a daredevil free diver. In May of 2013, he became the first American man to dive down to 100 meters with a single breath. In November of 2013, he attempted to achieve another record. He wanted to reach 236 feet with 1 breath of oxygen and without the assistance of flippers. These photos were taken right after his dive. As he resurfaced, he gave the OK sign, tried to speak, but then he passed out. He never regained consciousness. He passed away from pulmonary edema. Now, look at these photos. He looks terrified. He looks incredibly shocked and in pain. Sadly, those were the last photos taken of him. Starting off this countdown, we have Carter Christensen. This photo is of Carter Christensen. On this day, Carter went for a free solo climb alone at Flatirons in Boulder, Colorado. He was an experienced climber and had gone on several trips alone. However, this would be his last. Shortly after this photo was taken and posted to his social media, he fell more than 100 feet down the cliff to his death. Carter was not using any sort of safety gear while climbing. No other climbers saw him fall, but they heard it happen and tried to help. However, when first responders arrived, Carter was already dead. They don't know if the selfie had any correlation to his death or if he just slipped and fell while climbing. Either way, it's incredibly sad and also heartbreaking to see this photo of him. He looks so happy on his climb. Little did he know it would be his last. Moving on to number 9, we have the burning windmill. Back in 2013, 2 young mechanics were doing maintenance work on a wind turbine when it unexpectedly caught fire. The fire spread fast into their only escape route, making it impossible for them to descend the turbine without being scorched by the flames. This is the last photo ever captured of them. It shows the 2 standing on top of the turbine holding on to each other. The photo was taken by a bystander. Shortly after this photo was taken, one of the men jumped or fell off the turbine to his death. The other stood on top until eventually the flames got to him. These 2 young men went to work thinking it was going to be just a normal day, but it wasn't. Imagine how they must have felt being trapped up there. It's so devastating. Moving on to number 8, we have the deadly selfie. Another sad story of a selfie gone wrong. In 2016, a man decided to go with his friends to explore a waterfall in India. That's when he decided to descend to a lower level near the waterfall so he could have it in the background of his selfie. His friends warned him not to, but he did it anyways. The photos you see here are of him just before he fell off the cliff and 170 feet into the water below. Apparently, while climbing down, he lost his grip and he fell. People caught this on video and took several photos as it happened. What's sad is that in the video, one of the men in the background can be heard saying, "He is gone," after he fell. In our 7th spot, we have Jolie Callan. On this day, 18-year-old Jolie Callan went on a hike with her ex-boyfriend. Jolie wanted to still remain close friends with her ex even after they broke up, but he wasn't happy about this at all. On the hike, he shot her twice and then pushed her off the mountain. Before doing so, he took several photos of her on the hike and posted it to his Instagram. He turned himself in later that day. On his Instagram, he posted the photos with the caption, "Oh yeah, just enjoying the view," and "Oh, at Jolie is a kitten, the photographer." I find it especially scary that Jolie has her back to the camera in these photos, because she literally had no clue what was going on behind her back, and had no idea that the guy she once loved would then take her life. In our 6th spot, we have the cliff selfie. Sadly, over the years, the number of people dying from taking selfies on cliffs has increased. This case happened just recently. A couple of months ago, a woman named Elisa went out for a walk with her friend as a celebration after her city lifted the lockdown. While on this walk, she climbed over a safety fence to pose for a photo with the park's waterfalls in the background. However, after the photo was taken, she slipped on the grass and fell 115 feet down to her death. Her traumatized friend called the authorities right away, but there was no way she would have survived that fall. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the traveling duo. Meenakshi Murthy and Vishnu Vishwanath were travel bloggers that documented all their travels for their followers to see. The couple had traveled to a number of places like Niagara Falls and the Grand Canyon. Sadly, their trip to Yosemite National Park would be their last. It's still unclear what happened, but it's believed that the couple were setting up their tripod and camera near the edge of the Taft Point cliff when they fell over 1,000 feet to their death. The last photo of them were from that day. Another couple had been taking selfies near that same point and realized that they captured Meenakshi in the background of one of their photos. They also reported that the 2 had been there as it was starting to get dark. Could it be that they fell from having low visibility? We don't know, but their bodies have been discovered after their camera equipment was found abandoned at Taft Point. The creepiest thing? On Instagram, it seems almost like Meenakshi foreshadowed her own death. On a post with a photo of her sitting on a cliff in the Grand Canyon, she wrote, "A lot of us, including yours truly, is a fan of daredevilry attempts of standing at the edge of cliffs. But did you know that wind gusts can be fatal? Is our life worth one photo?" It's very, very creepy considering what happened to them. In our fourth spot, we have Gary Box. Chances are, while browsing the internet, you have seen this very famous photo. This is a photo of a man named Gary Box, a firefighter who sadly passed away trying to rescue people during 9/11. This was the last photo ever captured of Gary. In the photo, you can see him running through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel towards the towers among traffic. In fact, Gary's family never got closure as to what actually happened to him. His body was never found. 9 years after this photo was taken, the family finally found it online. And I mean, that was the last time that they saw Gary, so in a way, seeing him in action that day brought some closure for them. Moving on to number 3, we have the Thai diver. Back in 2018, 12 boys and their soccer coach were trapped in a cave in Thailand. Apparently, after practice, the coach took them to explore a set of caves in which some of the boys were familiar with. But upon doing so, the weather turned bad and the cave began to flood. Trying to avoid the water, this pushed them further and further into the cave. That's when Navy SEAL diver Saman Kunin came in to try and save the boys. Kunin and his team had to transfer oxygen tanks to the 13 individuals. However, while doing so, he ran out of air and lost consciousness in one of the passageways. This is the last photo ever taken of him. It was taken just before going to try and rescue the boys. His passing is very sad, but he died a hero, and because of him and his team, the boys survived. And in our number 1 spot, we have Marco Siffredi. Marco Siffredi was a French snowboarder and mountaineer. He was determined to be the first person ever to snowboard down Mount Everest. In 2001, Marco and his friends climbed Mount Everest. However, when they reached the top, they found that there was not enough snow for him to board down, so they took a different route down. But Marco was set on going down that one specific route, so a year later, he went back to the same spot. This time, he was excited to see that there was enough snow for him. Now, the trek to the top of the mountain took 12.5 hours. The team suggested camping out for the night and that they could all board down the next day. But Marco had come this far. It was his dream, so he decided, despite being overly exhausted, to head down the mountain. This photo was the last photo ever taken of him. It was taken right before his descent down the mountain. He was never seen again. His body was never found. To this day, they don't know what happened to him, but his friends believe that he collapsed on the mountain from exhaustion and then tumbled into the mountain's ravines. Moving on to number 9, we have David Johnston. David Johnston was a 31-year-old volcanologist that fell victim to a volcano explosion on May 18, 1980. 13 hours before his death, this photo was taken of him. That was the very spot that he was killed. So on that day, it was Johnston's shift to keep an eye on Mount St. Helen, the mountain where the explosion occurred. He was 6 miles away from the volcano. That morning, the eruption came fast and without warning. As it was erupting, he signaled to the base saying, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." Shortly after he radioed that, he was killed by a lateral blast from the volcano. Sadly, his body was never found. All that was left were remnants of his trailer. Now, it breaks my heart seeing that photo. Just look how happy he looks. Little did he know that 13 hours later, that would be it. And at number 8, we have the dangerous selfie. Taking selfies any and everywhere is kind of the new norm, but you would never think that a selfie would be deadly. Sadly, you'd be mistaken. Back in March of 2017, best friends Nitzia Mendoza Corral and Clarissa Morquicho Miranda were taking selfies on an airstrip when they were hit and killed by an oncoming plane. The two were standing in the back of a van when this happened, but they were warned not to do so. They took this photo, and moments later, they were hit by a wing of a plane that they didn't see coming. They passed away instantly. Now, when you look at this photo, it just feels so dark, knowing seconds later the girls lost their lives. Coming in at number 7, we have the extreme selfie. 26-year-old Wu Yongning was known for his extreme selfies. He was considered a rooftopper, which means he would stand on high buildings or structures or other precarious places and take photos and videos doing so. He made a living doing this, and he would do so with no harness, net, or safety equipment. This photo was one of the last photos he ever took. That was before November of 2017 when he died after falling off of a 62-story building. He was doing this as part of a contest to win 100,000 yuans, but this would be the last of his dangerous stunts. He climbed up to the top of that building that day with the hopes of winning that prize. He never thought it would end the way that it did. In our 4th spot, we have Anne Faber. On the evening of September 29th, 2017, Anne Faber went out for a bike ride by herself. By 6:50 p.m., she got caught in the rain and sent this selfie to her boyfriend. An hour later, her boyfriend reached out to her, but by then it was too late. Anne had already been kidnapped. Her body was found 2 weeks later in the woods. That was the last photo Anne ever took, and also the last photo of her. Moving on, number 3, we have the stowaway. At 14 years of age, Keith Sapsford was sent to a Catholic residential school. He hated it so much that he fled, heading to the Sydney airport with hopes of stowing away on an airplane headed to Japan. But his plan took a deadly turn. On February 22nd of 1970, he snuck into the airport and climbed into the airplane's wheel compartment. He waited there safely for the plane to take off. Sadly, when the plane was 200 feet in the air, the plane wheels retracted and he fell 200 feet to his death. At this time, a photographer named John Gilpin was taking pictures at the airport when he saw the boy falling from the sky. He managed to capture this photo. That was the last photo ever taken of Keith. Literally, you see him falling from the sky. It's creepy. In our 2nd spot, we have Japan Airlines Flight 123. This photo was recovered from Japan Airlines Flight 123, the flight that ended up in disaster with the plane crashing and 520 people dying. This incident is said to be one of the deadliest single plane crashes in the history. Only 4 passengers survived. On August 12, 1985, the plane took off at 6:12 p.m. and was scheduled to arrive at Osaka 1 hour later. But during the flight, the pilot had trouble controlling the plane, and they began to lose altitude quickly. This photo was taken as that was happening. You can see the oxygen masks drop down as a result. After failing to gain control of the plane, it crashed into Mount Takamagahara. This is the last photo of almost everyone on board.